Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Before we begin this powerful story of survival and revenge, I have a small request. If you're enjoying these stories, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more. It really helps us grow. And don't forget to comment down below and let us know where in the world you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Now, settle in for tonight's tale. The cold hit Clara like 1,000 needles all at once, a sharp, unforgiving pain that stole the breath from her lungs. One moment she was in the heated, if tense, atmosphere of her own home, and the next she was cast into the frozen void of a Midwestern winter night. She stood on the dark porch, barefoot, wearing nothing but her thin cotton nightgown, a flimsy barrier against the elements that clung to her skin, already turning damp from the swirling snow. The world was a study in monochrome. Snow fell in thick, relentless sheets, covering the lawn, the driveway, and the skeletal trees in a deep, pristine white. The only light came from a weak, flickering street lamp at the corner of the street, casting long, dancing shadows that did little to pierce the overwhelming darkness. Her breath plumed out in frantic, small clouds that vanished almost instantly into the freezing air. Behind her, the sound she dreaded most cut through the howling wind, the definitive, metallic click of the deadbolts sliding home. Her heart seized. She spun around, her bare feet slipping on the icy wooden planks, and pounded on the solid oak door with both fists. The impact was a dull, hollow thud against the storm door's glass. "Dennis! Dennis, open the door! It's freezing!" Nothing. No movement from within, no shadows shifting behind the blinds. Only the mocking whistle of the wind. She slammed her palms against the wood again and again, the sting of the impact a distant cousin to the deep, penetrating cold that was already seeping into her bones. "Please," she cried, her voice cracking. "It's freezing out here. You can't do this." His voice came through the door, muffled by the wood and glass, but laced with a cruelty that was colder than the ice forming on the porch railing. "Then go to your parents." A pause, deliberate and hateful. "Oh, wait. You can't. They're dead." Clara's blood ran colder than the air around her. She stopped pounding, her hands falling limp at her sides. "Hope you freeze out here," he added, his tone flat and final. Then, silence. A silence more profound and terrifying than any scream. It was the silence of abandonment, of absolute malice. She stood there, shaking violently, not just from the cold, but from the shock of what had just happened. Her own husband. The man she had vowed to spend her life with, had thrown her out of their home in the middle of a winter storm, wearing almost nothing. The temperature had to be well below zero, the weatherman had warned it was the coldest night of the year. She could already feel a terrifying numbness creeping up from her toes, a deadening sensation that promised worse things to come. The wind, sharp as a razor, cut through the thin cotton of her nightgown like it wasn't even there, raising goosebumps on her skin that felt like chips of ice. A fresh wave of panic surged through her. She pounded on the door once more, her movements becoming clumsy and weak. "Dennis! You can't do this. I'll die out here." No answer. The house remained a dark, silent fortress. She looked around desperately, her gaze scanning the street. It was empty and utterly still. Snow mounded over the cars parked along the curb, buried the sidewalks, and weighed down the branches of the trees. Not a single soul was outside. Why would they be? It was nearly midnight on a weekday in the worst cold snap in a decade. Everyone with a shred of sense was tucked inside, warm and safe behind double-paned windows. Her teeth started chattering uncontrollably, a rapid, jarring clatter that echoed in her skull. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to conserve what little body heat she had left, but it was a futile gesture. The cold was everywhere, a living entity seeping into her skin, her muscles, her very bones. It was a deep, aching cold that promised sleep, a sleep from which she would never wake. A new, desperate thought formed through the haze of fear and cold. The window. The large picture window next to the door. She could break it. She could find a rock or a piece of firewood from the decorative pile by the steps, smash through the glass, and climb back inside. It was her home, too. Her name was on the mortgage, even if he acted like it was his sole dominion. She had every right to get back in. Stumbling forward, she made her way down the 3 porch steps. The sensation of her bare feet meeting the frozen ground was agony, a sharp, burning pain that made her cry out. Each step was a fresh torment. She fell to her knees in the snowbank that lined the walkway, frantically digging with hands that were quickly turning stiff and blue. She searched for something, anything heavy enough to shatter the double-paned glass. Her fingers, numb and clumsy, scraped against frozen dirt and icy stones. She couldn't feel them anymore. They were just blocks of ice at the end of her arms. Tears of frustration and pain welled in her eyes, freezing on her lashes. This was it. This was how it would end. Found frozen on her own front lawn, a pathetic figure in a nightgown. Then, a miracle. A sliver of golden light cut through the darkness. She heard a door open. Clara looked up, her vision blurry. The house next door, the one belonging to the elderly widow, Mrs. Porter, was now illuminated. The woman herself stood in her doorway, a silhouette wrapped in a thick, quilted robe, her white hair pinned back neatly despite the late hour. "Child," she called out, her voice firm but clear, carrying across the frozen yard. "Come here. Right now." Clara hesitated. She barely knew this woman. In the 2 years they had lived next door, their interactions had been limited to a handful of polite waves from the driveway, a brief good morning while collecting the mail. That was it. She was a private person, and Clara, increasingly isolated by Dennis, had never made an effort. "Now," Mrs. Porter said again, her tone brooking no argument. "Before you lose those fingers to frostbite." I don't know if it was the bone-deep cold, the sheer shock of her situation, or just the simple, profound fact that this was the first person to show her a shred of kindness in so long, but something broke inside Clara. A dam of pride and fear gave way. Without another thought for the locked door behind her or the man on the other side of it, she pushed herself to her feet and stumbled through the deep snow, towards the light, towards the voice, towards salvation. Mrs. Porter pulled her inside the moment she crossed the threshold, shutting the door firmly against the biting wind. The change in atmosphere was so sudden it was dizzying. The warmth of the house wrapped around Clara like a physical blanket, so intense it was almost painful. She stood just inside the door, dripping melted snow onto a clean, floral-patterned rug, her body shaking so violently she could barely remain upright. Mrs. Porter didn't ask questions. Not yet. She took one look at Clara's blue-tinged lips and shaking form and disappeared down a hallway. She returned a moment later with a thick, gray-wool blanket which she wrapped tightly around Clara's shoulders, rubbing her arms briskly to generate heat. Then, she guided Clara to a well-worn armchair position directly over a heating vent. "Sit," she instructed. "Don't move." Clara collapsed into the chair, the soft fabric a stark contrast to the frozen porch. Her whole body felt like it was on fire as the warmth began its slow, agonizing work of bringing feeling back to her frozen skin. 1,000 pins and needles prickled up her legs and into her feet, which throbbed with a deep, aching pain. Her fingers ached similarly, the sensation returning in a painful flood. She looked down at her hands. They were red, raw, and already beginning to swell from pounding on the door. She knew there would be bruises tomorrow. More bruises to add to her collection, hidden in plain sight. Mrs. Porter came back with a steaming mug of tea and pressed it into Clara's hands. The heat of the ceramic was almost unbearably wonderful. "Small sips," she advised. "Let your body warm up slowly. Too fast can send you into shock." Clara nodded, too overwhelmed to speak, and took a tiny, scalding sip. The tea was sweetened with honey and had a strong, herbal strength to it. It spread a comforting warmth through her chest, a small, glowing ember in the core of her frozen being. Mrs. Porter sat down in the chair opposite her, a high-backed rocking chair. She didn't say anything at first, just watched Clara with sharp, intelligent gray eyes that seemed to see everything, the fear, the shame, the years of hidden pain. Finally, she spoke. "That man is your husband." It wasn't a question. Clara nodded anyway, her eyes fixed on the steam rising from her mug. "And this isn't the first time he's hurt you?" Again, not a question. Clara looked down, unable to meet that penetrating gaze. She didn't answer. What could she say? How could she admit to this virtual stranger the pathetic truth of her life? Mrs. Porter leaned forward slightly, the old rocking chair creaking softly. "I've lived in this house for 43 years, she said quietly. "These walls are thinner than you might think. I hear things." Clara's face burned with a shame so hot it rivaled the heat from the vent. All this time, this woman had heard them. Heard Dennis's screaming tirades, the sound of things being thrown, her own muffled sobs late at night. The privacy she thought she had was an illusion. "I've seen things, too," Mrs. Porter continued, her voice steady. "The way you flinch when he raises his voice in the driveway. The bruises you try to hide with long sleeves in the summer. I'm old, child, but I'm not blind." Tears, hot and unchecked, spilled down Clara's cheeks and dripped into her tea. She couldn't stop them. The kindness in the woman's voice, the simple act of being seen, was her undoing. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words choked. "I'm so sorry for disturbing you all this time. For all of it." Mrs. Porter's stern expression softened around the edges. "You have nothing to apologize for," she said, her voice firm. "Nothing at all." She reached over and patted Clara's knee gently, a grandmotherly gesture that felt more comforting than any blanket. "Now, listen to me carefully," she said, her gray eyes locking with Clara's. "My son is your husband's boss. His name is Gregory Porter. He runs the firm where your husband works." Clara stared at her, the information not quite computing. She knew Dennis worked at a prestigious firm called Porter and Associates. She knew it was a big deal, a source of immense pride and pressure for him. But she had never, ever made the connection to the quiet old woman who lived next door. "Stay here tonight," Mrs. Porter said. "Stay as long as you need. And tomorrow," she added, a steely note entering her voice, "things are going to change. That man will be begging for your forgiveness before the week is out." Clara didn't know what to say. She didn't understand what she meant. How could anything change? Dennis held all the power. He controlled the money, the house, the car, her entire life. He had systematically isolated her from her friends, and her family was gone. He was the sun around which her miserable world orbited. But something in Mrs. Porter's voice, a quiet, unshakable certainty, made Clara want to believe her. It was a tone that left no room for doubt. The older woman stood up and gestured for Clara to follow. She led her down a short hallway to a small, neat guest room at the back of the house. The bed was made with clean, crisp white sheets and a thick, handmade quilt in a pattern of blue and white stars. To Clara, it looked like the most beautiful, comfortable thing she had ever seen. "Get some sleep," Mrs. Porter said. "We'll talk more in the morning." "Thank you," Clara whispered, though the words felt utterly inadequate for the immense debt she now felt. "Thank you so much." Mrs. Porter nodded and turned to leave. Then she paused at the door, her hand on the knob. "What's your name, child? I don't believe I've ever caught it." "Clara," she said softly. "Clara Bennett." "Clara," Mrs. Porter repeated, as if tasting the word. "That's a beautiful name. It means bright and clear. You remember that." Then she closed the door softly behind her, leaving Clara alone in the quiet, peaceful room. Chapter 2, The Thaw. Narrator. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're as invested in Clara's story as I am. If you are, please don't forget to show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more gripping stories like this one. And let us know in the comments where you're joining us from today. Clara stood alone in the center of the quiet room, still wrapped in the thick wool blanket, the now lukewarm mug of tea still clutched in her hands. The profound silence was broken only by the faint hum of the furnace and the soft, relentless patter of snow against the windowpane. It was a peaceful sound, so different from the angry, howling wind that had threatened to consume her just half an hour before. Her body had stopped its violent shaking, but her mind was racing, a frantic hamster on a wheel. How did this happen? How did her life come to this? Standing frozen in a neighbor's guest room, having barely escaped becoming a tragic headline. Her thoughts drifted back to the argument that had been the catalyst for this nightmare. It had been so stupid, so trivial. Dinner. The chicken she'd made was too dry, the potatoes underseasoned. A normal person might have shrugged, maybe made a sandwich. For Dennis, it was a personal affront, a symbol of her profound inadequacy. "It's like you're not even trying, Clara," he had sneered, pushing his plate away. "Do you have any idea how hard I work? I provide everything for you, and you can't even manage to put a decent meal on the table." She had tried to defend herself, a rare moment of pushback. "I'm sorry, Dennis. I followed the recipe. I thought it was fine." His eyes had narrowed. "Fine? You thought it was fine? That's the problem with you. No standards. No ambition. You're content with fine." He'd stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You don't appreciate anything I do for you. You'd be nothing without me. Living in a box under a bridge." The words were familiar, a well-worn groove in the record of their marriage. But tonight, something in her had snapped. The constant degradation, the endless criticism, it had built up like a pressure cooker. "I do appreciate you," she had said, her voice trembling but clear. "But I'm tired of you talking to me like I'm an idiot. I'm tired of walking on eggshells in my own home." That was the wrong thing to say. The wrongest thing. His face had darkened, a storm cloud descending. "Your home," he had said, his voice dangerously low. "Your home? I pay for this home. Every single stick of furniture, every bite of food you put in your mouth, comes from my labor. My effort." He had taken a step towards her, and instinctively, she had flinched back. That single, involuntary movement seemed to enrage him further. He closed the distance in 2 swift strides and grabbed her upper arm, his fingers digging into the soft flesh with brutal force. It was the same place he always grabbed her, where the bruises wouldn't show. "Don't you ever," he hissed, his face inches from hers, his breath smelling of the wine he'd been drinking, "tell me how to talk to you in my own house. Do you understand me?" Terrified, she had nodded, the fight draining out of her as quickly as it had come. But it was too late. The beast was fully unleashed. "Get out," he had snarled, releasing her arm with a shove. "What?" she had whispered, stunned. "I said get out. If you're so tired of this house and of me, then leave. Go on. Get out." He had marched her to the front door, her protests falling on deaf ears. She remembered the feel of the cold door handle against her back, the shocking blast of frigid air as he threw the door open, and the final, sickening click of the lock. Now, safe but shattered, she replayed it all. She thought of all the arguments before this one, a relentless montage of cruelty. The way he would remind her, after her parents died, that she had no one else. "Who would want you, Clara? You're lucky I put up with you." He had made himself her entire world, only to use that position as a weapon. She sat down on the edge of the soft bed, the quilt yielding beneath her. Through the wall, she could hear the low, muffled sound of Mrs. Porter's voice. She was on the phone with someone. Clara couldn't make out most of the words, but she caught a few clear, distinct phrases. "Tomorrow morning. My house. It's important. Yes, Gregory. No, it can't wait." A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold ran down Clara's spine. Gregory. Her son. Dennis's boss. Who was she calling? What was she planning? A large part of her was terrified of the repercussions, of Dennis's fury when he realized she had involved someone else, and someone with power, no less. But beneath that fear, a tiny, fragile spark ignited in the cold, dark emptiness inside her. It was a feeling she hadn't felt in a very, very long time. Hope. She finished the last of her tea, the honey sweetness a comfort on her tongue, and lay down on the bed, pulling the heavy quilt up to her chin. It smelled faintly of lavender and fabric softener, a clean, safe smell. She closed her eyes, the events of the night playing like a nightmare behind her eyelids. Outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing the world in a deceptive peace. Inside her old house, just a few dozen feet away, Dennis was probably already asleep, satisfied that he had taught her another lesson, that he had reasserted his control. He was likely dreaming, smug and secure in his dominion. But as Clara drifted into an exhausted, fitful sleep, one thought echoed in her mind, a thought that was both a promise and a threat. This isn't over. This is just the beginning. She woke to sunlight. It streamed through the unfamiliar floral print curtains, painting bright golden rectangles on the opposite wall. For a long, disorienting moment, Clara didn't know where she was. The room was too quiet, too peaceful. The sheets smelled like lavender instead of the cheap, perfumed detergent Dennis insisted she buy because it was always on sale. Then, memory returned in a brutal, crashing wave. The argument. The cold. The locked door. Mrs. Porter. She sat up slowly, her body protesting with a chorus of aches and pains. Her feet were still sore and tender, the skin feeling tight and sensitive. Her fingers were stiff when she tried to flex them. But she was alive. She was warm. She was safe. She looked around the guest room in the clear light of day. It was small but lovely, filled with personal touches that spoke of a life well lived. Framed black and white photographs of a young couple, presumably Mrs. Porter and her late husband, adorned the dresser. A vase of carefully preserved dried flowers sat on the windowsill. A small bookshelf was crammed with classic novels, their spines cracked from use. Everything was clean, cared for, and deeply peaceful. It was the kind of room that made you feel that everything would be all right. She heard sounds coming from elsewhere in the house, the clink of dishes, the low rumble of a morning news program on a television, the whistle of a kettle. They were normal, everyday sounds, yet they felt strange and foreign to her after so long in a house perpetually filled with a walking on eggshells tension. She noticed a robe laid out neatly at the foot of the bed. Mrs. Porter must have come in while she slept and left it for her. It was a soft, well-worn flannel robe, the kind someone keeps for years because it feels like a hug. Gratefully, Clara slipped it on over her nightgown and opened the bedroom door. The smell of breakfast hit her immediately, making her stomach clench with a sudden, sharp hunger. Eggs, buttered toast, and something sweet and spicy like cinnamon. She followed the aroma to the kitchen and found Mrs. Porter standing at the stove, flipping something in a cast-iron pan. She turned when she heard Clara's footsteps, her expression calm and welcoming. "Good morning, Clara. How do you feel?" "Better," Clara said, her voice still rough with sleep and leftover emotion. "Thank you. For everything." Mrs. Porter waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense. Sit down. Eat. You need your strength." She moved to the table and set a plate down in front of an empty chair. It was heaped with fluffy scrambled eggs, perfectly brown toast, and a plump, homemade cinnamon roll, still warm from the oven, icing dripping down its sides. Clara's stomach growled loudly, betraying her. She couldn't remember the last time she had eaten a proper meal. She had been too anxious to eat dinner last night, her stomach in knots knowing Dennis was coming home in a foul mood after a bad day at work. She sat and ate slowly at first, then with increasing speed as the flavors registered. The food was simple, but it was delicious, made with care. It tasted like comfort. Like safety. Mrs. Porter sat across from her with her own cup of tea, watching her with a small, knowing smile. "When did you last have a proper meal?" she asked gently. Clara thought about it, her fork hovering over the plate. She honestly couldn't remember. Most of her meals were eaten standing over the sink, quickly, before Dennis could find something to criticize about her eating habits. "That's what I thought," Mrs. Porter said quietly, a flicker of anger in her gray eyes. When Clara had finished, scraping the last bit of egg from her plate, Mrs. Porter took it and refilled her teacup. Then she sat back down, folded her hands neatly on the table, and looked at Clara with a serious, intent expression. "Now," she said, "I think it's time we talked. The plot is truly thickening now, isn't it? Clara is safe for the moment, but the battle is far from over. If you're hooked and want to know what happens next, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next part. And while you're here, we'd love to hear from you. Comment down below and tell us where you're watching from." Clara nodded, though a knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. The kindness was overwhelming, but it also felt like a prelude to something difficult. She had spent years building walls around her pain, and now she was being asked to tear them down. "I told you last night that I've heard things through these walls," Mrs. Porter began, her voice measured. "Arguments. Crying. Things breaking. It's been going on for as long as you've lived next door." Clara looked down at her hands, at the red, swollen knuckles. The shame was a hot, physical weight in her chest. She felt exposed, her private humiliation laid bare. "I should have said something sooner," Mrs. Porter continued, her tone laced with a regret that surprised Clara. "I should have knocked on your door and asked if you were all right. But I told myself it wasn't my business. I told myself you would leave if it was really that bad." She paused, her gaze unwavering. "I was wrong. And I'm sorry for that." Clara looked up, stunned. This woman, who had saved her, was apologizing to her? "It's not your fault," she said quickly, the words tumbling out. "None of this is your fault." "Maybe not," Mrs. Porter conceded. "But I'm involved now, and I intend to help you." She leaned forward slightly, her expression both gentle and fierce. "Tell me about him, Clara. Tell me about your husband. I want to understand what you've been dealing with. Where to even begin? How do you condense years of systematic erosion into a single conversation? How do you describe the slow, insidious way a person can dismantle you, piece by piece, until you no longer recognize the person staring back in the mirror?" But Mrs. Porter waited. She didn't rush. She didn't interrupt. She simply created a space of silence, a vacuum that Clara felt compelled to fill. "So," she started. She told her how she and Dennis had met 4 years ago at a mutual friend's birthday party. He had been charming, funny, and intensely focused on her. He made her feel seen, special, beautiful. He brought her flowers for no reason, opened car doors, remembered her favorite wine. He was a whirlwind of romance and attention, and she, still grieving her parents, had been swept away. She described how things began to change almost imperceptibly after the wedding. The compliments slowly morphed into constructive criticism. The charm became control. He started telling her what to wear, claiming certain colors washed her out or that some styles were unflattering. He commented on what she ate, pushing fad diets on her, telling her she'd feel better if she lost a few pounds. He subtly discouraged her from seeing her friends, making comments about Linda being a bad influence or that other couples were boring. She told her about the money. How he had insisted on taking over the finances, saying it would lessen her burden. He gave her a strict, weekly cash allowance and demanded receipts for every penny spent. Meanwhile, he bought himself expensive watches, new golf clubs, the latest electronics, while she wore the same faded jeans and sweaters for years. Then she told her about the anger. The terrifying, unpredictable eruptions over the smallest things, a single dish left in the sink, a light left on in an empty room, dinner being served 5 minutes late. He would scream at her until she was reduced to a trembling, crying mess, and then he would coldly inform her that she was too sensitive and couldn't take a joke. She told her about her parents, their tragic death in a car accident 3 years ago. How Dennis had been her rock at the funeral, holding her hand, making all the arrangements. And how, within months, he began to use their death as a weapon. Every argument ended the same way. He would remind her that she had no one else. No family. No options. Just him. "You're lucky to have me, Clara. No one else would put up with you." Finally, her voice barely a whisper, she told her about the bruises. The ones she hid under long sleeves and high-necked blouses, even in the sweltering heat of summer. He was always careful, strategic. Never the face. Never anywhere that would be visible to the outside world. Always on her upper arms, her ribs, the soft flesh of her thighs. By the time she finished, she was crying silently, tears streaming down her face and dripping onto the table. She hadn't meant to say so much. She hadn't spoken about these things to anyone, not even Linda, not in such raw, unvarnished detail. But once she started, it was like a poison was being drained from a wound, painful but necessary. Mrs. Porter handed her a tissue and let her cry, her own face a mask of quiet fury and profound sorrow. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly when Clara's sobs had subsided into hiccuping breaths. "I know that wasn't easy." "What do I do now?" Clara asked, her voice thick with tears. "I have nothing. No money of my own. No family. Nowhere to go. He controls everything." Mrs. Porter shook her head slowly, a determined glint in her eye. "That's what he wants you to believe, Clara. But it's not true." She stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the snow-covered backyard. "I told you my son runs the firm where your husband works. What I didn't tell you is that my late husband, Arthur, founded that firm 40 years ago. He built it from the ground up with integrity and hard work." She turned back to face Clara. "I may be a quiet old woman, but I still have some influence in this town. And I still own a significant portion of that company." She walked back to the table. "I also have a very good lawyer. A woman I've known for 30 years. Her name is Helen Cross, and she handles cases like yours all the time. Divorces, protective orders, asset division. She's helped dozens of women get out of situations just like this." Clara stared, overwhelmed. A lawyer? It seemed an impossible, distant concept. I can't afford a lawyer." "You don't need to," Mrs. Porter said firmly. "Helen owes me a favor. Several favors, actually. She'll take your case pro bono." Clara shook her head, trying to process it all. It was too much, too fast. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "You barely know me." Mrs. Porter's expression grew distant, her gaze turning inward. She walked back to her chair and sat down, folding her hands once more. "I had a brother once," she began, her voice soft with memory. "His name was Robert. He was a cruel man. He treated his wife, Sarah, the way your husband treats you. Maybe worse." She paused, collecting herself. "Sarah stayed with him for 15 years, hoping he would change. He never did. He only got worse." Clara watched her, the air in the room growing heavy. "She died in that house," Mrs. Porter said, the words dropping like stones. "Fell down the stairs," they said. "But I knew the truth. Everyone in the family knew the truth. There was nothing we could prove, but we knew." Her gray eyes, sharp and clear, locked with Clara's. "I swore after Sarah's funeral that I would never stand by and watch it happen again. I broke that promise when I ignored what was happening in your house. I heard the shouting, I saw the fear in your eyes, and I did nothing." Her voice hardened with resolve. "I will not break that promise again." She reached across the table and took Clara's hand. Her skin was soft, papery with age, but her grip was strong. "You are not alone, Clara. Not anymore. I'm going to help you. My son is going to help you. And by the time we're done, that man will regret every single thing he ever did to you." Clara squeezed her hand, tears welling up again, but this time they were not just tears of pain, but of a staggering, unbelievable relief. For the first time in years, she had an ally. For the first time, she dared to believe that things might actually, truly change. The support for Clara's story has been incredible. If you're just joining us, you're going to want to go back and watch the first part so you're all caught up. And for everyone here, if you're invested in seeing Clara take her power back, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The peace Clara found in Mrs. Porter's guest room was a foreign country, and she was a grateful, if nervous, immigrant. That first full day, she slept. She slept through the afternoon, deep and dreamless, a coma of exhaustion born from years of hypervigilance. There were no footsteps to listen for, no tension coiling in her chest waiting for the bedroom door to slam open. There was just silence, warmth, and the soft, muffled sounds of a calm household. When she woke the next morning, the sunlight felt different, softer, more forgiving. She could hear voices in the kitchen. Mrs. Porter's calm, measured tone, and a man's voice, deep and serious, with a professional cadence that she didn't recognize. Her heart, conditioned to panic at the unfamiliar, beat a little faster. She got dressed quickly in the clothes Mrs. Porter had left for her, a simple, soft sweater and a pair of comfortable slacks that had belonged to her daughter who lived out of state. They fit well enough, and wearing them felt like putting on a suit of armor made of normalcy. She walked down the hallway toward the kitchen, pausing at the doorway. Mrs. Porter sat at the table with a man in a well-tailored dark suit. He was perhaps in his late 40s, with hair graying at the temples and sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. A leather folder was open on the table in front of him, and he held a sleek, expensive-looking pen. This was a man of business, of consequence. They both looked up as she appeared. "Clara," Mrs. Porter said, her voice warm. "Come in, dear. Sit down. This is my son, Gregory." Gregory Porter stood, his movements economical and precise. He extended his hand. "Mrs. Bennet," he said, his voice as deep as it had sounded from the other room. His handshake was firm but not aggressive. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, not pity, but something closer to a focused, professional concern. "It's nice to meet you. I wish it were under better circumstances." "Thank you," Clara managed, her voice small. "And thank you for coming. I know you must be very busy." "Not too busy for this," he said, his tone leaving no doubt that he meant it. They all sat. Mrs. Porter poured Clara a cup of coffee without asking, pushing the cream and sugar toward her. Clara wrapped her hands around the warm mug, grateful for the anchor. Gregory opened his leather folder and looked at her directly. "My mother told me what happened 2 nights ago. She also shared some context about your marriage." He paused, letting the weight of that statement settle. "I want you to know that everything you say to me stays in this room. Legally, I must act on certain information, but your confidence is otherwise paramount. I'm not here as your husband's boss right now. I'm here as someone who wants to help." Clara nodded slowly, the knot in her stomach loosening just a fraction. "That said," he continued, "I do have some questions about your husband's behavior, not just at home, but at work. Anything you can tell me might be useful." Clara frowned slightly. "I don't know much about his work. He never really talked to me about it. Just complained sometimes." "That's fine," Gregory said, picking up his pen. "Tell me what you remember. Even small details can matter." She thought back, sifting through the debris of 4 years of dinner-table rants and weekend grumblings. "He came home angry most days," she began slowly. "He always blamed his coworkers. He said they were jealous of him, that they formed cliques to make him look bad." She took a shaky breath. He talked about taking credit for things, projects that other people had worked on. He would present them as his own ideas. He bragged about it to me like it was clever. Gregory's pen scratched across the paper. He didn't look surprised. Go on. He complained about a man named Thomas a lot. Said Thomas was always watching him, always checking his work. Dennis called him a snitch. Thomas Whitfield, Gregory supplied. He's one of our senior accountants. Very thorough, very by the book. Dennis hated him, Clara confirmed. He said Thomas was going to ruin his career. Gregory nodded, making another note. The air in the kitchen was thick with unspoken implications. Then Clara remembered something, a night that had been different. About 6 months ago, she said, her voice dropping, he came home really late. He wasn't angry, he was nervous. Jittery. He told me he had to take care of something at the office. He said, she swallowed, the memory feeling treacherous. He said he'd shredded some documents. Documents that he wasn't supposed to have. He said if anyone found out, he would be fired. She looked down at her coffee mug. He made me promise not to tell anyone. He said it was my fault for asking too many questions when he got home. She felt sick just remembering it. At the time, she'd been so conditioned to his moods that his nervousness had been a welcome relief from his anger. She hadn't questioned it, she was just relieved he wasn't yelling at her. Gregory looked up sharply, his professional calm cracking for a fraction of a second. Did he say what kind of documents? No. But he was scared. It was the only time I ever saw him look genuinely scared. Gregory closed his folder with a definitive snap. The sound made Clara jump. He leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. Mrs. Bennet, I have to be honest with you. Your husband has been on thin ice at my firm for over a year. We've had complaints from multiple coworkers about his attitude, his temper, and his habit of taking credit for others' work. But we never had enough solid, actionable evidence to justify termination without a lengthy and messy process. He paused, his gaze intent. What you just told me about the documents changes things. That's not just bad behavior or poor teamwork. That's potentially criminal. It speaks to a profound lack of integrity. Clara's stomach dropped. I didn't mean to get him in trouble. You asked. You didn't do anything wrong, Gregory said firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. You answered my questions honestly. That's all I asked you to do. The consequences are a direct result of his actions, not your truth-telling. Mrs. Porter reached over and gave Clara's hand a reassuring squeeze. Gregory checked his watch and stood. I need to get to the office. I have some calls to make and some files to review. I'll be in touch soon. He shook Clara's hand again before he left. At the door, he turned back. Mrs. Bennet, what you did took courage. A lot of people in your situation would stay silent to protect themselves, or out of fear. You didn't. That matters. Then he was gone, the front door closing with a soft, final click. Clara sat at the table, her mind spinning. Everything was moving at a velocity she couldn't comprehend. 48 hours ago, she was locked out of her house in a snowstorm. Now, she was sitting in her neighbor's kitchen while her husband's boss, the son of that neighbor, investigated him for possible crimes. Mrs. Porter refilled her coffee. You did well, she said. I know that wasn't easy. What happens now? Clara asked, her voice barely a whisper. Now we wait, Mrs. Porter said calmly. Gregory will do what needs to be done. And while we wait, she added, a determined glint in her eye, we start planning your future. She said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, as if Clara's future was a tangible thing she could pick up and mold with her own hands. For the first time, Clara allowed herself to believe it might be true. The story is really unfolding now, and Clara is finding allies she never knew she had. It just goes to show, you are never as alone as you might feel. If this story is resonating with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe. And don't be shy. Drop a comment to say hello and tell us where you're joining the story from. The rest of the morning passed in a strange, peaceful limbo. Mrs. Porter, sensing Clara's overwhelmed state, didn't push for more conversation. Instead, she gave her a gentle tour of the house, a place Clara had only ever seen from her own window. The living room was spacious and comfortable, with big bay windows that looked out onto the snowy street. The furniture was old but well cared for, the bookshelves stuffed with a lifetime of reading. She showed Clara the small library, a cozy nook with floor-to-ceiling shelves and a worn leather armchair with a reading lamp. Arthur's favorite room, she said softly, a fond smile touching her lips. She pointed out the garden through the kitchen window, a white, blank canvas. It's a mess under all that, she said, but in the summer, it's glorious. Roses, peonies, lavender. You'll see. The way she said you'll see, with such simple certainty, sent another thrill of that unfamiliar hope through Clara. It implied a future. It implied she would still be here. Mrs. Porter told her stories about her husband, Arthur, who had died 10 years ago. He was a good man, she said, her voice warm with memory. Hard-working, but kind. He built that firm from nothing, an idea and a second-hand desk. He always said his employees were his greatest asset, and he treated them like family. That's why Gregory takes it so personally when someone violates that trust. It's not just business to him. It's his father's legacy. Clara understood that. She was beginning to see the Porter family not as distant, powerful figures, but as people with a strong moral core. It was a stark contrast to the selfish, transactional world Dennis inhabited. Around noon, the phone on the kitchen wall rang, its old-fashioned jangle startlingly loud. Mrs. Porter answered it, listened for a moment, her eyes flicking to Clara. "It's for you," she said, holding out the receiver. "It's Linda. From the bakery." Clara's heart leapt with a mixture of joy and anxiety. She took the phone. "Hello? Clara." "Oh, thank God." Linda's voice was tight with worry, a familiar and comforting sound. "Where are you? Are you okay? You didn't come to work yesterday. I've been calling your house all morning, and Dennis just keeps hanging up on me. He told me to mind my own business." The concern in her friend's voice undid her. "I'm okay," Clara said, the words feeling inadequate. "I'm at my neighbor's house." "Something happened." "What kind of something?" Linda's tone shifted from worried to protective. "Clara, talk to me. Right now." Clara looked at Mrs. Porter, who gave her an encouraging nod. So, leaning against the kitchen wall, the coiled phone cord wrapped around her finger, she told Linda everything. The argument, the locked door, the paralyzing cold, Mrs. Porter taking her in. She left out the details of her conversation with Gregory, but she conveyed the essence: she was safe, and she wasn't going back. Linda was silent for a long moment after she finished. Clara could almost hear her friend's furious, protective thoughts racing. "I'm coming over," Linda said, her voice decisive. "Right now." "You don't have to." "Clara," Linda interrupted, her tone leaving no room for argument. "What's the address?" 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Clara opened it to find Linda standing on the porch, her coat dusted with snow, her face a mask of fury and relief. She didn't say a word, she just pulled Clara into a bone-crushing hug. "I knew it," she whispered into Clara's shoulder, her voice thick with emotion. "I knew something was wrong. I should have pushed harder. I should have made you talk to me. I saw the bruises, Clara. I saw how you jumped every time your phone buzzed." "It's not your fault," Clara said, hugging her back just as tightly. "It's not yours either. Linda pulled back, her hands on Clara's shoulders, her eyes searching Clara's face. "You're not going back to him." It wasn't a question, it was a command. "Promise me." Clara thought of the cold porch, the locked door, the way Dennis had told her to freeze. She thought of the years of quiet despair. She looked into her friend's determined eyes and felt the last vestiges of her own doubt crumble. "I promise," she said. And for the first time, she knew with every fiber of her being that she meant it. The next few days passed in a strange, new rhythm that felt both surreal and deeply right. Clara stayed with Mrs. Porter, sleeping in the guest room, eating meals at her kitchen table, helping her with small tasks, washing dishes, folding laundry, sorting through a box of old photographs. Mrs. Porter never made her feel like a burden. She never asked when she was leaving or what her long-term plan was. She simply created a space where Clara could exist, could breathe, could begin to remember who she was outside of Dennis's shadow. Linda came by every day after her shift at the bakery. She brought a bag of clothes from her own closet, jeans, sweaters, socks, underwear, since Clara had nothing but the nightgown she'd escaped in. She brought toiletries, her favorite shampoo, and a stack of gossip magazines for important news, she'd said with a wink. She sat with Clara for hours, talking about everything and nothing, work, movies, memories from before Dennis. It was a lifeline to the person Clara used to be. For the first time in years, Clara felt the constant, gnawing tension in her shoulders begin to ease. She laughed, a real, unforced laugh, at something Linda said, and the sound was so foreign it startled her. She was breathing deeply, fully, the air in Mrs. Porter's house feeling cleaner, lighter. But the real world was still out there. Dennis was still out there. He still had legal power over her. They were still married. And everything she owned, every photograph of her parents, every memento from her past, was trapped in that house next door. On the fourth day, the call came. Mrs. Porter answered the phone in the kitchen, her expression unreadable as she listened. After a moment, she held it out to Clara, who was sitting on the living room sofa, attempting to read a novel. "Clara," she said quietly. "It's Gregory." Clara's breath hitched. She stood and took the phone, her hand trembling slightly. "Hello? Clara, it's Gregory Porter." His voice was all business, but there was an undercurrent of satisfaction in it. "I wanted to update you. We completed our internal investigation this morning. Based on what you told me and what we subsequently found in our financial records and through interviews with other staff, we've terminated your husband's employment. Effective immediately." Clara sat down heavily on the sofa, her legs suddenly weak. "Terminated," she repeated, the word feeling large and dangerous. "Yes. The evidence of document destruction related to a client audit was grounds enough. But we uncovered more. Falsified reports, misappropriated client funds, things we might never have found if you hadn't pointed us in the right direction." He paused. "He was systematically stealing from the company, Clara. And he was not particularly clever about covering his tracks once we knew where to look." She didn't know what to say. A whirlwind of emotions roared within her, relief, terror, a shocking lack of surprise. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice small. "Now it becomes a legal and potentially criminal matter. We've reported our findings to the authorities and to the licensing board. There will likely be charges filed, but that's out of my hands." He paused again, and his voice softened slightly. "I also want you to know that word travels fast in this industry. Your husband's reputation is finished. No reputable firm in this state, or any adjacent one, will hire him after this." She thanked him, her mind reeling, and hung up the phone. Mrs. Porter was watching her closely from her armchair. "It's done," Clara said, the words feeling surreal on her tongue. "He's been fired." Mrs. Porter nodded slowly, a grim satisfaction in her eyes. "Good. That's the first step." Clara's thoughts immediately flew to Dennis. He was probably just finding out. She could picture it with terrifying clarity: the call into Gregory's office, the cold, formal meeting, the accusation of crimes, the security guard escorting him out of the building while his former colleagues watched. He would be sitting in his car in the parking lot right now, stunned, humiliated, and then, inevitably, furious. And he would know who to blame. "He's going to come here," Clara said, her fear spiking, turning her blood to ice. "When he puts it all together, he's going to come here." Mrs. Porter's expression didn't change. "Let him come." "You don't understand," Clara insisted, her voice rising with panic. "When he's angry, he's not rational. I've never seen him this angry before. Losing his job, his reputation, he'll be out of his mind. He'll think he has nothing left to lose." "Clara." Mrs. Porter's voice was calm, but it held a steel that could not be bent. "I have dealt with angry men before. I am not afraid of your husband. And you," she added, her gaze locking with Clara's, "you shouldn't be either. Not anymore." Clara wanted to believe her. She desperately wanted to borrow some of this elderly woman's formidable courage. But years of conditioning, of learned fear, were a cage she couldn't quite shake off. She knew Dennis. She knew the monster that lived behind his eyes. And that monster was now cornered. The moment we've been waiting for is here. The confrontation. But remember, folks, the quietest people often have the strongest resolve. If you're on the edge of your seat, make sure you've liked the video and subscribed so you can see how this all plays out. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. They didn't have to wait long. Around 3 o'clock that afternoon, the peace of the quiet street was shattered by the sound of a car engine roaring down the road, followed by the screech of tires and the sickening thud of a curb being hit. Clara, who was in the living room trying to read, instinctively went to the window. Dennis's car sat crookedly at the curb in front of their house, one wheel pitched up onto the snow-covered sidewalk. The driver's door flew open and he stumbled out. He was a mess. His tie was loose and askew, his expensive suit jacket was wrinkled, and his hair was a wild mess, as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. His face was a mottled, furious red. He stormed toward his own house first, disappearing inside. Even from across the yard and through the walls, Clara could hear him, doors slamming, his voice shouting her name, a wordless roar of pure rage. Then, silence. A moment later, he burst back out onto the porch. He stood there, his chest heaving, and looked around wildly, like a predator searching for its prey. Then his eyes, burning with hatred, landed on Mrs. Porter's house. On the window where Clara was standing. Their eyes met through the glass. Clara stumbled back from the window, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "He saw me," she gasped, turning to Mrs. Porter, who was sitting calmly in her rocking chair. "He knows I'm here." Before Clara could say another word, before she could beg her to lock the doors and call the police, Mrs. Porter stood up. "Good," she said, her voice steady. "It's time we had a conversation with him." And with a calmness that bordered on the supernatural, she walked to the front door and opened it just as Dennis was marching across the yard, his fists clenched into white-knuckled hammers at his sides. "Where is she?" he shouted, his voice raw and cracking. "Where's my wife?" "Mr. Bennett." Mrs. Porter stood in the doorway, a small, frail-looking figure blocking his path. She was a foot shorter than him and decades older, but she didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. "Lower your voice. You're making a scene." "I don't care about a scene," he bellowed, spittle flying from his lips. "She's my wife, and I want her back. Now." "Clara is my guest," Mrs. Porter replied, her tone icy. "She'll leave when she chooses to leave." Dennis took a menacing step forward, towering over her. "Listen to me, you old bat," he snarled, his veneer of civility gone completely. "I don't know what lies she's told you, but this is none of your business. She belongs in that house. With me. She belongs wherever she feels safe," Mrs. Porter retorted, her voice sharpening. "And clearly, that's not with you." Dennis's face twisted into a grotesque mask of fury. You have no idea what you're talking about. Clara is confused. She's emotional. She needs to come home so we can work this out like adults. Clara knew this tone. It was his public tone, the one he used at company picnics or when the neighbors were within earshot. The fake reasonableness, the calm voice that hid the seething rage underneath. He was trying to paint her as hysterical, unstable. He was trying to recruit Mrs. Porter to his side. But Mrs. Porter wasn't fooled. Not for a second. I know exactly what I'm talking about, she said, her words dropping like stones. I've heard you screaming at her through these walls for 2 years. I've seen the bruises she tries to hide. I know what kind of man you are. Dennis's calm mask shattered. His jaw tightened so hard Clara thought she could hear his teeth grinding. You don't know anything about our marriage. I know enough, Mrs. Porter said. And so does my son. That stopped him dead. Clara saw the recognition, the dawning horror, flash across his face. The pieces were clicking into place. Your son, he said slowly, the fight draining from his posture for a moment, replaced by confusion and a flicker of fear. Gregory Porter. Your former employer. She emphasized the word former with exquisite cruelty. I believe you met with him this morning. The color drained from Dennis's face, leaving him a pale, shaking ghost of the man who had stormed across the yard. The bluster was gone, replaced by a cold, sick realization. That was you, he whispered, his eyes wide with shock and hatred. You did this. You got me fired. You got yourself fired, Mrs. Porter corrected him, her voice cold and precise. My son simply discovered the truth about who you really are. A bully and a thief. Dennis stood there, breathing hard, his shoulders slumping. I could see him struggling to process it all, to find a new angle of attack. Then his eyes slid past Mrs. Porter and found Clara, standing frozen in the hallway, watching the entire exchange. His expression changed. The fury was still there, but it was now mixed with a desperate, wheedling plea. Clara. His voice changed, softened into the manipulative tone she knew so well. Clara, please. Just come out here and talk to me. We can fix this. I know I made mistakes, but I can change. I love you. You know I love you. She had heard these words so many times before. After every fight, after every cruel remark, after every bruise. He was always sorry. He always promised to change. And every single time she had believed him, every single time she had gone back, it had gotten worse. The cycle was as predictable as it was destructive. This time, something was different. This time, she had a witness. She had an ally. She had a taste of safety. She walked forward slowly until she was standing beside Mrs. Porter in the doorway, drawing strength from the older woman's unwavering presence. No, Clara said. Her voice was quiet, but it was clear and steady. It did not shake. Dennis blinked, as if he hadn't heard her correctly. What? I said, no, she repeated, her voice growing stronger. I'm not coming back. I'm not going to talk this out. We're done. His face hardened, the pleading mask slipping away to reveal the ugliness beneath. You don't mean that. You're just upset. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years, Clara replied, and she meant it. He took a step forward, a threatening movement, but Mrs. Porter held up a single, imperious hand. That's close enough. You're on my property now, and I'm asking you to leave. Or what? Dennis snarled, but the threat was weak, blunted by his own crumbling position. Or I call the police, Mrs. Porter said calmly. And then I call my lawyer. And then I call my son back and give him a detailed report of the threatening way you're behaving toward 2 women, one of them elderly, on my private property. I'm sure the judge handling your other matters would be very interested to hear about that. Clara saw Dennis's eyes dart around. For the first time, he seemed to become aware of their audience. Mr. and Mrs. Hoffman from across the street were standing on their porch, watching. The young couple from 2 doors down were at their window, their faces pressed to the glass. The entire street was witnessing his humiliation. He was cornered, outmaneuvered. His jaw clenched. He looked at Clara one last time, his eyes burning with a promise of future retribution. "This isn't over," he said, the words low and venomous. Then he turned, shoulders hunched in defeat, and walked back to his car. He got in, slammed the door hard enough to shake the vehicle, and sped away, the tires spinning on the slushy pavement. Mrs. Porter closed the front door and calmly turned the deadbolt. She let out a slow, measured breath. "Well," she said, turning to Clara with a faint, satisfied smile. "That went about as expected." Clara was shaking, her whole body trembling with the adrenaline crash. But beneath the fear, beneath the residual terror, a new sensation was blooming, warm and bright and powerful. She had done it. She had looked him in the eye and said no. For the first time in her marriage, she had stood her ground. And she had won. We're in the final chapters of Clara's journey, and my goodness, what a journey it's been. If you've been with us from the beginning, you'll know how far she's come. If you're just joining, you're in for a powerful conclusion. Don't forget to like and subscribe to be part of our storytelling community. The weeks that followed Dennis's humiliating retreat were some of the hardest of Clara's life, but they were also the most formative. It was a period of painful unraveling and slow, deliberate reconstruction. Mrs. Porter's lawyer, the formidable Helen Cross, became Clara's champion and shield. Helen filed for divorce on grounds of cruel and inhuman treatment, accompanied by a request for a full order of protection. She moved with a swift, ruthless efficiency that left Clara in awe. Dennis, reeling from his termination and the looming threat of criminal charges, fought back with the only tools he had left, lies and intimidation. He hired a slick, aggressive lawyer who filed counterclaims, alleging that Clara was mentally unstable, that she was the abusive one, that she had stolen from him, and that she was having an affair. He claimed her flight to Mrs. Porter's was a calculated move to destroy his life. For a moment, the old fears threatened to resurface. What if they believed him? What if his charm and bluster could still sway people? But Helen was prepared. She was a warrior in a pinstriped suit. She entered the courtroom with a binder of evidence that was a testament to Clara's silent suffering. There were the photographs Linda had secretly taken on her phone over the past year, faded yellow and purple bruises on Clara's upper arms, visible when she reached for a baking sheet or stretched in a tank top. There were signed, notarized statements from neighbors who admitted to hearing Dennis's violent shouting and Clara's terrified crying. There was Mrs. Porter's powerful, unwavering testimony about the night she found Clara, half-frozen and desperate, on her porch. And finally, there was the evidence from Porter and Associates, the documented proof of Dennis's professional misconduct, his theft, his lies. It painted a picture of a man with a profound lack of character, a man whose cruelty was not confined to the walls of his home. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with tired eyes, saw through Dennis's facade immediately. She granted Clara the order of protection, barring Dennis from coming within 500 feet of her, Mrs. Porter's home, and the bakery. She also froze their joint assets, giving Clara access to a modest living allowance while the divorce was pending. It was a temporary victory, but it was monumental. The divorce itself moved with a speed that stunned Clara. Dennis's financial house of cards was collapsing. Without his high-paying job and with legal fees mounting from both the divorce and his impending criminal case, his resources were evaporating. His own lawyer, seeing a sinking ship, eventually convinced him to settle. Clara didn't want a fight. She didn't want his money or the house filled with bitter memories. She told Helen she wanted only 3 things: her freedom, a clean break, and the personal belongings that held sentimental value: her parents' photo albums, her grandmother's jewelry, her own books and clothes. Dennis, desperate to avoid a public trial that would detail every one of his failures, agreed. The divorce was finalized on a bright, crisp Tuesday morning. Clara signed the papers in Helen's sunlit office, her hand steady. There was no fanfare, no dramatic pronouncement. Just the quiet, definitive scratch of a pen. When it was done, Linda was waiting for her outside. She took one look at Clara's face, pulled her into a fierce hug, and then declared, "Coffee. Now. We're celebrating." They sat in their favorite little cafe downtown, the one with the chipped mugs and the best apple pie. Linda raised her cup. "To new beginnings," she said, her eyes shining. Clara touched her mug to Linda's. The ceramic was warm in her hands. "To new beginnings," she echoed. The words felt strange on her tongue, like speaking a new language. For so long, she had believed her life was a closed loop, a path with no exits. Dennis had made her believe she was nothing without him, that she had no options, no worth. But here she was, sitting in a cafe on a sunny afternoon, a legally free woman. The world, which had felt so small and dark for years, was suddenly vast and full of light. Mrs. Porter, true to her word, helped Clara find a small apartment. It wasn't far from her house, a cozy one-bedroom in a quiet building. It was tiny, with a kitchen the size of a closet and a living room that could barely fit a couch and a chair, but when Clara stood in the empty space on the day she got the keys, she didn't see limitations. She saw potential. She saw freedom. The lease was in her name. The key in her hand was hers, and hers alone. She stood there and cried, not from sadness, but from a relief so profound it felt like a physical force. Linda and Mrs. Porter helped her furnish it. They spent weekends scouring thrift stores and flea markets, laughing as they haggled over prices. Linda's cousin donated a slightly wobbly kitchen table. Mrs. Porter brought over a spare set of dishes, pots, and pans, and a beautiful, hand-stitched quilt for her bed. It wasn't fancy or expensive, but every piece was chosen with care. It was hers. It felt, for the first time, like a home. She returned to work at the bakery full-time. Patricia, the owner, a kind-eyed woman who had always treated her well, gave her more hours and a small raise. "You've earned it, Clara," she said, patting her shoulder. "You're one of the best, most reliable workers I've ever had." Clara had flushed with pride. Dennis had always told her the job was a pity offer, that she was lazy and careless. But Patricia saw her value. Linda saw it. Mrs. Porter saw it. Slowly, tentatively, Clara was starting to see it, too. Her Sunday teas with Mrs. Porter became a cherished ritual. Gregory stopped by sometimes as well, his quiet, serious presence a steady reminder of the justice that had been served. He even offered to write her a reference letter if she ever wanted to apply for a management position or go back to school. "You helped us more than you know," he told her one afternoon. "The least I can do is return the favor." As winter loosened its grip and spring began to timidly emerge, Clara started taking long walks in the evenings after work. It was a simple pleasure, but one she had been denied for years. Dennis would have demanded to know where she was going, who she was meeting, why she needed to be outside. Now, she walked wherever she wanted. She breathed in the cool, fresh air scented with thawing earth. She watched the sun set behind the budding trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. She was the master of her own time, her own body, her own life. Inspired by this new sense of agency, she enrolled in a night class at the local community college, an introductory business course. She wasn't sure what she wanted to do yet, but she knew she wanted more. More than just getting by. More than just surviving. The class was challenging. She hadn't cracked a textbook in years, and her confidence wavered. But she studied every night at her little kitchen table, surrounded by her thrift store finds, a cup of tea at her elbow. The focused effort felt good. It felt like building something. When she passed the final exam with a solid B, she felt a pride so pure it brought fresh tears to her eyes. Linda threw her a small party to celebrate. It was just a few friends from the bakery and Mrs. Porter, crammed into Linda's apartment, eating store-bought cake and laughing. It was loud and warm and full of love. You should be proud of yourself, Mrs. Porter said as she was leaving, pulling on her coat. You've come a very long way. Clara thought of the woman she had been just a few months before, freezing on a porch in her nightgown, pounding on a locked door, believing with every fiber of her being that she had nowhere to go. I had help, Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. Mrs. Porter smiled, a deep, genuine smile that reached her wise gray eyes. She patted Clara's cheek gently. You had help, she agreed. But you did the hard part yourself, my dear. You chose to walk away. You chose to fight. You chose to build a new life. Never forget that. Clara never would. It's been an honor to share this journey with you all. If this story has moved you or given you hope, please let us know in the comments. And now, let's see how Clara's new beginning unfolds. Spring melted into a warm, generous summer. Clara's small apartment became a true sanctuary. She kept a vase of fresh flowers on her table, bought just because they made her happy. She learned to cook simple meals for herself, eating when she was hungry, not when she was commanded. The silence in her apartment was no longer oppressive, it was peaceful, filled with the gentle sounds of her own choosing, the radio playing soft music, the turning of a page in a book, the quiet hum of the refrigerator. She was healing. The ghost of Dennis was still there, a faint echo in moments of unexpected noise or a sudden raised voice in the street, but it no longer controlled her. She was Clara Bennett, and she was learning, day by day, what that meant. One Sunday afternoon in early June, she was leaving Mrs. Porter's house after their weekly tea. The air was sweet with the scent of lilacs from Mrs. Porter's garden, finally in glorious bloom. Clara was smiling, a light, easy feeling in her chest as she stepped onto the sidewalk. And then she saw him. He was leaning against his car, which was now older and dustier than she remembered. He looked diminished. He was thinner, his expensive suits replaced by a wrinkled polo shirt and jeans. His face was tired, the arrogant set of his jaw softened by defeat. His eyes, which had once burned with fury, were now just red-rimmed and weary. Her heart didn't jump into her throat this time. It simply beat a little faster, a cautious, steady rhythm. "Clara," he said, his voice hoarse. He held up his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Please. I just want to talk." She stayed where she was, on Mrs. Porter's path, the house a solid, protective presence behind her. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, her voice calm and even. "There's a court order." I know. He ran a hand through his hair, which was thinning, she noticed. I needed to see you. I lost everything, Clara. My job, the house, my savings, everything. I've been staying with my brother. I have nothing left." She looked at him, this man she had once loved, had once been terrified of. The man who had held so much power over her. Now, he just looked like a sad, broken stranger. "I'm sorry," he said, and for the first time, it sounded like a real apology, stripped of its manipulative sheen. It was the apology of a man who had finally hit rock bottom. "I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for all of it. I was angry and stupid and I took it all out on you. But I can change. I know I can. Just give me another chance." She had heard these words before. 100 times. 1,000. And every time, a part of her had wanted to believe them. Every time, she had let them pull her back into the darkness. But not this time. The memory of that winter night was no longer a source of paralyzing fear, it was a source of strength. It was the line of demarcation between her old life and her new one. She remembered the cold, the locked door, the way he had told her to go to her dead parents. She remembered the bruises, the constant criticism, the systematic destruction of her spirit. He had made his choices. And she had made hers. "No," she said. His face crumpled. "Clara, please." "No," she repeated, her voice stronger, clearer. You made your choice when you threw me out in the cold. You told me to freeze. You told me I had nowhere to go. You don't get to take that back. You don't get another chance to break me." He started to cry then, real, helpless tears that rolled down his face. For a single, fleeting moment, she almost felt sorry for him. The part of her that had once loved him, the part that was wired for compassion, twinged in sympathy. But then she remembered the years of fear, the countless times she had cried just like this, alone and hopeless. Her sympathy hardened into resolve. "Goodbye, Dennis," she said, her tone final, absolute. "Don't come here again." She turned her back on him and walked, without haste, back up the path to Mrs. Porter's front door. She didn't look back. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and closed it firmly behind her. She engaged the deadbolt with a solid, satisfying thunk. Through the lace curtains of the front window, she watched him. He stood there for a long moment, his shoulders shaking. Then he wiped his face roughly with the back of his hand, got into his car, and drove away. He didn't look back, either. He never came back. Months later, on a perfect autumn afternoon, Clara stood at the window of her own apartment, looking out at a world painted in gold and crimson. The trees were ablaze with color, and the sky was a clear, brilliant blue. She had a new textbook open on her table. She was taking a second class, accounting this time, and a cup of tea steamed gently beside it. She thought about the woman she used to be. The one who believed she was trapped. The one who thought she deserved the pain. The one who flinched at slamming doors and hid her bruises under long sleeves. That woman felt like a character from a book she'd read long ago, a sad story about someone else. She wasn't that woman anymore. The journey wasn't always easy. There were still nights filled with bad dreams, moments of doubt, and the lingering scars of emotional trauma. But she was facing them. She was in therapy, paid for with her own money from her job. She was building a future with her own two hands. She was Clara Bennett. Bright and clear. And for the first time in her adult life, she was utterly, completely, and gloriously free. And that, everyone, is the conclusion of Clara's story. From a place of darkness and fear to a future filled with light and her own strength. It's a reminder that no matter how trapped you may feel, there is always hope, and there is always a way forward. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please do us a huge favor and like this video, subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of resilience and hope, and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Until next time, take care of yourselves.